November 3rd, 1959, 4:47 p.m. The Teresa Hotel, 125th Street, Harlem. Bumpy Johnson pressed the elevator button for the lobby after a 3-hour meeting with 2 union representatives on the 8th floor. The meeting had gone well. Numbers, percentages, protection arrangements. Standard business. The elevator doors opened. Empty. Bumpy stepped inside. Just as the doors started to close, 3 men pushed through. They weren't hotel guests. Bumpy could tell by the way they moved, by the bulges under their jackets, by the way they positioned themselves the moment they entered, 1 directly across from Bumpy, 2 flanking the sides. The moment Bumpy saw them, his mind made 3 calculations in less than 2 seconds. First, he recognized the lead man's face from a photograph Julius had shown him 2 weeks earlier, a Genovese soldier named Marco Terranova who specialized in close-quarters work. Second, the positioning was professional, textbook ambush formation designed to eliminate reaction time and escape routes. Third, they'd waited for him specifically, which meant they knew his schedule, knew he'd be alone, knew this was their window. None of these observations changed Bumpy's expression or posture. He simply shifted his weight slightly, putting his back closer to the corner, and kept his hands loose and visible. In situations like this, the first person to show fear was the first person to lose control, and Bumpy had no intention of giving them that satisfaction. The doors closed. The elevator began its descent. 8 floors to the lobby, maybe 45 seconds. Nobody spoke. Bumpy stood in the back corner, hands loose at his sides, watching all 3 men through the reflection in the polished brass doors. The man directly across from Bumpy was mid-30s, Italian, probably out of Brooklyn based on the cut of his suit. The 2 on the sides were younger, muscle, the kind of men who followed orders and didn't ask questions. At floor 7, the man across from Bumpy spoke. "You know who sent us?" Bumpy didn't answer. Floor 6. "Genovese family," the man continued. "We've got a message." Bumpy still didn't respond, just kept his eyes on the reflection, watching their hands, watching their positioning, calculating what would happen if this went the way these 3 men clearly intended. Floor 5. The man's hand moved toward his jacket. That's when Bumpy spoke for the first time, his voice quiet and level. "Before you do that, let me ask you something." The man's hand stopped. "What?" "You know where this elevator goes?" "The lobby." "No," Bumpy said. "After the lobby." Floor 4. "What are you talking about?" "This elevator," Bumpy continued, still not moving, "goes to the basement, maintenance level. That's where they take the bodies when something goes wrong in the Teresa. Been that way for 20 years. Ask anyone who works here." Floor 3. The 3 men exchanged glances. The younger 2 looked at their leader, uncertain. "You threatening us?" the man asked, but there was less confidence in his voice now. "I'm telling you how the building works," Bumpy replied. "You pull those guns, someone in this elevator doesn't walk out. Probably me. You're right, 3 against 1. Good odds." Floor 2. "But here's what you didn't think about. This hotel, I own a percentage. The doorman, mine. The security guards, mine. The maintenance crew that runs this elevator, mine." Bumpy's voice dropped even lower. "So when this elevator reaches the lobby and those doors open, what do you think happens? You think you walk out past my people carrying guns you just used? You think you make it to the street?" Floor 1. "Or do you think maybe this elevator doesn't stop at the lobby at all? Maybe it keeps going down to that basement I mentioned. And maybe the 3 people who get off down there aren't the same 3 people who are standing in here right now." The elevator slowed. The man across from Bumpy had gone pale. His hand, which had been moving toward his jacket, was now frozen halfway. "Here's what I think happened," Bumpy said. "I think Vito Genovese told someone he wanted me dead, and that someone told you to handle it. And you picked an elevator because it's private, it's contained, it's quick. Nobody sees, nobody knows." The elevator came to a stop. Lobby level. But the doors didn't open yet. There was always a 2-second delay. "What you didn't know," Bumpy continued, "is that I've been taking this elevator 3 times a week for 5 years, and every person who works in this building knows my face, knows my schedule, and knows that if something happens to me in their hotel, they're going to answer for it." The doors began to open. "So now you've got a choice. You can pull those guns and try to finish what you came here to do, and maybe you succeed. Maybe I'm dead before we hit the lobby floor." Light from the lobby spilled into the elevator. But then what? You walk out past 6 doormen, 4 security guards, and a lobby full of people who all saw you get on this elevator with me. You think Genovese protects you after that? You think he even remembers your names? The doors were fully open now. The lobby of the Teresa Hotel was directly ahead, 20 people visible, 2 security guards near the entrance, a doorman at the desk. Every single one of them was looking at the elevator. What the 3 men didn't know, what they realized only in that moment as they stood frozen in the elevator doorway, was that the Teresa Hotel had a protocol that had been in place since 1954. Any time Bumpy Johnson entered the building, the doorman made a discreet hand signal to the security staff. From that moment until Bumpy exited, every person working in the lobby kept partial attention on the elevator, watching for threats, watching for problems, watching for exactly this kind of situation. It wasn't obvious. The guards weren't staring. The doorman wasn't pointing. But Marco Terranova, who'd spent 15 years reading rooms and identifying exits and calculating odds, saw it immediately. These weren't random bystanders going about their day. These were coordinated observers who'd already clocked the 3 strangers, already noted the timeline, already understood that something had happened in that elevator. And now they were waiting to see what walked out. The younger man on Bumpy's left saw it too, his eyes darting from face to face, recognizing the pattern, understanding suddenly that the quiet man in the elevator hadn't been bluffing about this building, about these people, about any of it. "Or," Bumpy said quietly, "you can put your hands in your pockets, walk out of this building like nothing happened, and tell Genovese that you delivered his message, that Bumpy Johnson heard it, and that if Vito wants to have a conversation about Harlem, he can call me directly instead of sending 3 men who didn't think past the elevator ride." For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then slowly, the man across from Bumpy lowered his hand completely. No weapon, no threat. He looked at the 2 younger men. "Hands in your pockets. We're leaving." The 3 men stepped out of the elevator, hands buried in their coat pockets, and walked through the lobby without making eye contact with anyone. Bumpy waited inside the elevator for 5 seconds after they left. Then he stepped out, nodded to the doorman, and walked toward the exit like nothing had happened. What nobody saw, what those 3 men would never know, was that Bumpy Johnson had been carrying a .38 revolver in his waistband the entire time, positioned exactly where his right hand could reach it in less than a second. He'd made the calculation the moment those 3 men stepped into the elevator. If they drew first, he'd have maybe 1.5 seconds to respond. In a confined space that small, with 3 guns against 1, his odds of survival were less than 20%. So he'd changed the game. Not with a weapon, with a question. With information about the building's layout that may or may not have been true. The Teresa Hotel didn't actually have a basement maintenance level, but those 3 men didn't know that. And in the 45 seconds it took to descend 8 floors, Bumpy had planted enough doubt, enough calculation, enough fear about what happened after the shooting that pulling the trigger stopped being the obvious choice. That's the difference between surviving and winning. Surviving means you're still alive when the doors open. Winning means the other side never pulls the trigger at all. That night, one of the 3 men, the younger one who'd stood on Bumpy's left in the elevator, told the story to an associate over drinks in a Brooklyn bar. "We had him," the man said, still trying to process what had gone wrong. 3 of us, 1 of him, trapped, perfect setup. "So what happened?" the associate asked. "He talked." "About what?" "About the building, about who worked there,
about what happens after you pull the trigger." The man shook his head. "And the crazy thing is, I don't even know if what he said was true. But standing there in that elevator, with him just staring at us through the reflection, talking in that quiet voice about basements and bodies, I couldn't do it. None of us could." "You think he was armed?" "I don't know, probably. But that's not why we didn't shoot him." "Then why?" The man was quiet for a moment, trying to articulate something he didn't fully understand himself. "Because he made it clear that killing him was the easy part, and everything that came after would be impossible." The story of the elevator reached Vito Genovese within 2 days, passed through intermediaries who'd heard it from the 3 men who'd been there. Genovese called the man who'd led the attempt into his office. "You had him trapped. 3 guns, 1 target, 45 seconds. How does he walk out?" "He knew the building," he tried to explain. "He knew the people. He made it clear that—" "He talked you out of it," Genovese interrupted. "Yes." Genovese was silent for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. Not a warm laugh, a recognition laugh. "You know what that means?" Genovese asked. "That we failed?" "No. It means Bumpy Johnson is exactly as dangerous as people say he is. Because any man can survive a gunfight with luck or reflexes. But walking out of an elevator because you convinced 3 armed men that pulling the trigger was a bad idea? That's not survival. That's control." Genovese leaned back in his chair. "We're not sending anyone else to Harlem. If I want to deal with Bumpy Johnson, I'll do it myself, face to face, with respect." "Why?" the man asked.
Because he just proved he doesn't need a gun to be the most dangerous person in the room. And that's the kind of man you don't corner, you negotiate with. Bumpy Johnson rode the elevator at the Teresa Hotel hundreds more times over the next 9 years, and never once did 3 armed men step in with him again. The story became part of Harlem's oral history, told and retold in barbershops, bars, and street corners. Different versions emerged. Some said Bumpy had been armed with 2 guns. Others claimed he'd had backup waiting in the lobby. A few insisted the whole thing was staged to send a message to the Genovese family. But the people who worked at the Teresa Hotel, the doormen and security guards who'd been there that day, they knew the truth. Bumpy had stepped into that elevator alone and walked out the same way. And the only weapon he'd used was the understanding that violence is only power if everyone believes it's inevitable. Make them question that inevitability. Make them calculate the cost of the aftermath. Make them see past the immediate moment to the consequences that follow, and suddenly 3 guns don't mean anything. Because fear of being killed is powerful, but fear of what happens after you kill someone, fear of being trapped in a building where every face is your enemy, fear of walking out of an elevator into a lobby full of witnesses who all know exactly what you've done, that fear is stronger. That's not tactics, that's psychology. And Bumpy Johnson had spent 30 years studying the psychology of power, learning that the men who win aren't always the ones who shoot first. Sometimes they're the ones who make shooting seem like the worst possible choice. November 3rd, 1959. 8 floors, 45 seconds. 3 armed men, 1 unarmed man. No shots fired, no blood spilled. And when those elevator doors opened, only one person in that confined space still had control of the situation. The same person who'd had it the moment he stepped inside. Not because he had more weapons, because he understood the building better than they did. Because he knew that in a space that small, with that little time, the person who controls the narrative controls everything. 45 seconds. That's all it took to prove that power isn't about who's armed. It's about who understands what happens when the doors open. And Bumpy Johnson always understood. That's why he walked into that elevator alone.
and that's why he walked out the same way.